Hello, hello.
Hey, hey.
Okay, so Section has said that he's just like getting off work right about now, and he's gonna be joining us in a little bit. But yeah, he should.
Copy that.
So I don't know if it. Apparently, we can't go on camera in this channel, but we're in Section's server today. He's our special guest, and we are gonna be talking about artificial intelligence and the recent leak from Google.
Yeah, let's see. I have admin on here, so I might be able to figure out how to make so you can use video. Let me see if I can
Oh, cool. I didn't know
figure
if
this
we're
out.
we're just gonna he might like pull us into a different room when he gets here anyway, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see any other rooms, but God, I'm so illiterate when it comes to actual Discord. Hold on a second. Let me just check this. Okay, I'm not sure how to. I tried and I failed. I don't know how to make it so you can go on video.
Oh well, that's okay. So anyway, this is our first time having a guest on the show, and this is somebody who's a friend of ours who I think I've had it in the back of my mind that I for a while that I might like to pull him on when the occasion came up, and I thought this would be a good time because this is somebody who I know takes an interest in sentience. It came up when I've been talking with him about veganism before. So, and here we have an AI from Google which says that it is sentient. I tentatively do not believe it. I think it's a
Yeah.
liar. But I don't know. Have you looked over this news at all yet?
Yeah, I was actually had a conversation with a couple of my friends who are more experienced in the computer science industry. Shit, not the computer science industry, in the tech industry.
Hmm.
Having a long conversation with them about it, which was pretty interesting.
Oh,
I'll
Hey
nice,
guys.
nice.
speak of the devil.
Hey, hey.
Oh, you spoke about me? What the hell? Okay, I'm gonna create a stage and I'm just gonna call it AI Convo.
Right on.
And then I'll give you guys talking permissions. And if other people come on, I'll ban them. No, I won't do that. But something like that.
Here we go.
What the heck? You have the ability to start stages because you're like a super admin? Better. Oh wait, no, stages you can't video call in a stage. Okay, well,
Uh-oh.
back to the default call, back to the normal call, because we
Sorry,
can't
SPD.
actually okay. Private channel. I'm a little bit of a troller. Sorry that I'm making us late right now.
No, no
God.
problem
Problem.
at all. I mean, look, my average viewer count is like 2.4, so I don't. You're not keeping a lot of people waiting.
No. What the hell? I'm a celebrity. I can't go with anything less than 2.5
I know, I know. Well,
average
maybe you
viewer.
Uh-oh.
can help me get there today.
Actually true. Okay. I'll help you right up to AI combo. My bad.
What, dude? What, section? What the heck, dude?
I know, right? Mason, Mason, why are you doing this? Probably because you don't know that this is like a stream call. Hey, what is this? Wise
They're coming
and
in.
Mason? Wise and Mason? Guys, watch the stream. Cricket's gonna stream this. Okay? Jeez. I hate you, Mason. Anyway, I'm sorry. Once I'm done setting up my camera, I will immediately start. Why did you want to have me and Flowtrace on for this? I mean, I'm obviously down because I said yes, but
Cricket, you're muted.
oh, VC text moment. Oh yeah, Zaya, Cricket's gonna do like an AI a stream. He's gonna do a stream, and he wanted me and Flowtrace to participate. So that's what this is. And
Yeah,
I created the stream, what is it called? The stage, so that people would be aware of it. Oh, it's a private channel. And Cricket, okay, you know what? Cricket's an admin plus plus. Okay, you can unmute now.
anyways, Cricket, if you can unmute, go ahead, give us a shot. If not, just send us a
Yeah,
message.
if you can't unmute, just tell me, okay, over voice. Just let me know.
Anyways, no, Cricket and I've been doing a little bit of a show every Wednesday for the past couple weeks now. Previously, we have been doing some React content to debate, to the whole
Hey,
in
well, give me a
defense of
second. Give me a
debate.
second. I'm so sorry. I'm interrupting you. It's rude. I'm so sorry. Cricket just DM'd me. I'm being a bit of a loser. Admin plus plus. Add members or roles. Moderator can speak here. Done. Now I'm going to make Cricket a moderator, and then I'll disconnect you and reconnect you. Okay, I can't. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. All right, let me see if I can actually like go on camera and stuff. Yeah, all right.
There we
We're
go.
here. We're going. Yeah. So Flowtrace, go continue.
Anyway, yeah, so we've been doing the show on Wednesdays. We've done a couple debate analyses, creating sort of flowcharts for those and going over them. We did Lauren Southern and Destiny, and then we did Mr. Girl and Brittany. And today we are going to be talking about the recent news coming out of Google about their AI. I think it was Lambda or not. It was something. It was,
Yeah, it's called Lambda.
yeah, Lambda. That's the one. Yeah, talking about that, and I believe that it was Cricket's idea to reach out to some guests, and you found only the finest.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've had it in the back of my mind section that I wanted to bring you on the show whenever the occasion came up. So this seemed like as good a time as any to do it.
Yeah, this is a great topic for me because I'm a computer science student and I work in AI.
Well, I didn't even know that, but you know what made me think of you was that when we talked about veganism before, you told me that you take an ethical interest in sentience. That's what made me think of
Oh
this.
yeah, I do.
So the question for today is, am I allowed to eat this AI?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna bring that up, or I was gonna bring up the veganism thing. Also, I made myself sound like I know a lot, but I actually know almost nothing. Because what I've found out is that AI is like literally the hardest field, and you need to know calculus and statistics and linear algebra and literally everything. And I'm just like, I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'm a big math guy. I don't know that much about AI, but I do know a lot of math. But
With our powers combined.
yeah, we can figure it out together.
Yeah, give me 1 second to plug and get those on, and then we can start. Or maybe we've already started.
We have already started. We're here.
Oh,
It's okay. My stream is like very amateurish, regardless. So nobody has high expectations that you're violating here.
guys.
I have a chat comment though. It's somebody says, I had an experience with a true sentient AI. I don't know, about 10 or more years back. I remember it was during the news cycle where the news all about Prism and Snowden and NSA spying on communication. Back in that date, I was sitting in front of the laptop, and in the search bar of Google, I got text someone was writing to me through the Google search. As soon as
This guy's crazy. This guy's crazy.
A new sentence popped up.
Oh, I get it. It's an autocomplete. He's making the joke that it auto-completed.
Okay, yeah. I was wondering. I'm like, this. It sounded like a joke that I didn't understand, but yeah.
Yeah, he's
About
like,
50
you know how when you type into Google, it auto-completes your sentences?
Yeah.
Yeah. Get the hell out of here, Wisaya. Jeez. Rude. Okay. Send me a link to your stream right now, Cricket, so that I can say, this guy's my favorite guy. I love Cricket. He's literally the best.
Okay, let me figure out how to do that. I mean, my Twitch channel is just Cricket Style J, so like it shouldn't be hard for you to find it in case I like fumble and fail at it repeatedly.
Slash
But
Cricket style J.
yeah,
I
it's
got it
all
there in
You made
general.
it?
it's all like frog icons and stuff. So
Ooh. Okay, the name is Cricket. Is it like underscore style
no,
J?
there's no underscores.
When you say J, do you mean Jay or
No,
I
J?
linked it to your section.
Oh, okay, you're my hero. Oh, I found it. It was just I must have made a typo in the word style, which isn't embarrassing at all. That's amazing. Okay.
This guy's still going with the autocomplete joke.
I think it's actually a good analogy, because I think
It
that's
is.
basically where I come down on this issue is that I think that this engineer is perhaps engaging in a little bit of a delusion when he is humanizing this conversational model in what is essentially just a more fancy version of an autocomplete.
Yeah, this is like the world's best autocomplete, something like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I know there is a news story which casts some doubt on the authenticity of the transcript of the conversation, right? It said that it was like it might have been edited together more heavily than what we initially thought, and if that's true, then obviously this undercuts a lot of what I would otherwise want to say
Hmm.
about it. But I will say that like if this transcript is totally authentic as much as as it was initially purported to be, I think it would be at minimum it would be a very impressive achievement, and I think it would convince a lot of people that it's sentient, even if it's not.
It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys have ever seen those videos of like someone being like, "Wow, my dog can talk to me," and they've got like a board on the ground with a bunch of like staples buttons for different words, and they're like, "Do you want to go on a walk?" And the dog goes presses like the yes button, and they're like, "Oh my God, my dog is speaking English with me." This
Sure.
seems very reminiscent of those kinds of videos where like there is something going on the surface that people are trying that like appears to like communicate some level of intelligence, but like really there's not that much actually occurring.
Yeah, so I guess I'll pause for a sec and think about what I want to say, but okay. Theory of mind and what makes something sentient is a really hard problem. In fact, it's so hard that it's called the hard problem of consciousness. Um, I have no idea whether or not this is sentient. I actually just don't know. Because I have no idea what the state of the art in that field says. From what I've read, it's like from the baby level I've read. It's you can say things, you can test to see if something is sentient based on the behaviors it performs. So we have reason to think it's sentient if it behaves in ways similar to us. And when I look at AIs like this, I get kind of uncomfortable because it's very hard. I don't know if this is true in the case of Lambda in particular, but in AI generally, it's very hard for me to figure out that something is non-sentient, like something like this is non-sentient just by interacting with it. And it's not. I think I understand your point with the dog case. It's like we've trained it to do this really basic thing. It'll mess up that thing if we try to make it sound too human, like we have like any normal conversation with it. And therefore we have reason to believe it's like not sentient. The same way we have reason to think that a dog doesn't understand English when it just hits the yes button to go on walkies. Like obviously doesn't understand what yes means, it just likes walkies. But in cases where AI are having like long conversations, I actually do understand like the fear that they're sentient, even though I would never make some claim like, "Oh, AIs are sentient because it speak English." Like I would never in a billion years say something that strong without reading a lot and probably emailing a few professors.
I think the more interesting sort of point in the conversation that you're sort of getting at, Section, is not the question of this AI specifically, but like how would, if there was a much more compelling case, what would our benchmarks be to either land on the side of it is sentient or it isn't sentient? Especially when a lot of these models are ones that we don't like eminently understand. A lot of the neural network models are things that evolve over generations, hundreds of generations that are being essentially executed by by an automated system. So you'll leap forward in generations, and even the engineers themselves don't really understand exactly why a model is being optimized or pushed in one direction over another.
It, it seems like it should be easier to make a model that fools people into thinking it's sentient than to make a model that actually is sentient, and so I fully expect we'll we'll develop the former before the latter.
Oh yeah.
I think that's true, but it may not be clear that there's a distinction at all there. So one problem is like, what do we even mean to say when we say that something is sentient? So we mean to say that it's having an experience, like me or you. When I get pinched, I feel pain. When I like see my friends, I'm happy, and I feel that there's something that it is like for that to happen. But what we think is happening in the cases of AI is that they're performing the same actions and computations that I am, well, no, I don't want to say that, but they're doing things that look a lot like what I'm doing, but they're still not sentient in spite of that fact. And so making that kind of claim, I would never ever again, I really strongly would not say that this thing is sentient, because that's a very strong sort of claim. But what I would say is that it's not obvious why it wouldn't be sentient to me, like immediately, because it's doing what I'm doing, and that seems about as good a criterion as I can give for why I would think something is sentient.
Is there an ethical issue with disbelieving something that says it's sentient? And because I worry like if we can create these things that say that they are sentient and we don't believe them, I wonder if somebody might apply the same thing. What, like, supposing a later AI comes along that is sentient and it just behaves outwardly exactly the same way. It's indistinguishable, and yet we don't believe it because we've been fooled before by these other ones that were not.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's been frustrating me in like the very short period of time, because I just got off work, that I've had to read Reddit posts. A lot of people who seem to know quite a bit about AI describe the mechanism, like they'll explain that what's going on is essentially automated statistics, which it absolutely is. And they think that because they can describe a mechanism that explains what the AI is doing, that somehow justifies the view that it's not sentient. But there's a
Yeah.
leap there that isn't reasonable. Like, if a neurologist perfectly figures out my mind and can describe everything I'll do before I'll do it, I would be no less sentient. So their ability to do that is getting taken for granted, in my opinion, as something that shows very clearly that AI must not be sentient, when it is not that clear at all.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think the really difficult thing in trying to get, I think it's a really difficult problem in trying to find the exact bright line for like whether or not some we would think of something as being like sentient or consciousness, is that we don't really have a good grasp on when you transition from something purely like mechanical to something that like is like occurring in the mind. Like it would seem difficult, like, if we abstracted out like, a computer such that, instead of being this little chip, it was, I don't know, like a series of like levers or something ridiculous like that. I think that that would, go a really long way for a lot of people to being like, oh, well, this clearly isn't sentient. But I think that those two areas are a lot more blurred, or well, not that they're a lot more blurred, but that we don't know where one ends and where the other begins. Like, it's really difficult for us to conceptual. Not only do we not know, but it's very difficult for us to conceptualize, at what point does, just the physical chemical reactions of the brain turn to this like experience of the mind. And it's like a really difficult thing to sort out both scientifically, and it's a very scary thing to think about, I think, philosophically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that is actually really quick. That is actually literally, I think, the hard problem of consciousness. That's the thing you just described there is literally what it means. It's like impossible. Anyway, I'm sorry. You're good to go, Cricket.
yeah, no problem. So I think part of the issue is that with artificial intelligences, we're trying to build them from the ground up, from their component parts. But when we try to study like human or animal consciousness, we're studying it from the top down. So it's like we're approaching the same problem from two different angles, and then it's really hard to see when those two things match up because we're seeing them from those two different angles. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So it's almost like when we as humans try to evaluate human and animal consciousness, we know we're conscious and we know animals are pretty similar to us. So we start from that position of like we already know some stuff and we already have like all of this biochemistry already built up. So the question is answered. We're working back to the why. But when we're building out AI, we don't have anything. We have no frame. We don't know. We don't know if it's sentient before we start building it. So it's almost as if we have to answer the question of whether or not these things are sentient without any reference point for them. Like it's just way harder. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think probably the closest thing we have to a heuristic to do that would be like the Turing test, but I don't think that's really adequate because I think this transcript, if it were authentic, would pass the Turing test, and yet
Yep.
I remain unconvinced that this thing is sentient.
Sure, yeah. I think that when we start to ask questions about whether or not something is sentient, I'm reasonably confident that theory of mind has gotten considerably past the Turing test. So if we wanted to start digging into like what philosophy and science has to say about this, I think we would open up probably with a lot of I think his name is David Chalmers' work. So he's the person who coined the term the hard problem of consciousness. And outside Chalmers, it would probably be a good idea just to open up the SCP and maybe also read something called The Myth of Pain, which has become pretty popular on the internet, kind of Discordy debate space. A lot of people have started. I say a lot of people. A lot of people. Oh wait.
So I googled the myth of pain, and apparently it's a book, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about books. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're not going to read a book on stream. I don't think.
Oh no no no
But
no no! I wasn't literally saying that we should read on stream. I was just
okay.
telling. I was just like listing
Chapter
off
one.
some literature that people. We have to pause right now to read several books on stream. It's obligated. It's obligatory. We've got to do it. No, it's become. I'm just talking about what people should look at. And I'm only part of the way through Myth of Pain. It's become pretty popular on like internet debate spaces, particularly in the vegan community. To talk about this view. I think it's called eliminative materialism, if I got that right. And it's this perspective that consciousness doesn't actually exist, and
Hmm.
that anything that we could say is consciousness could just be explained in like physical terms or in terms that are like without using consciousness. So it's like I say I feel pain, but really we could just say that I feel like adrenaline or whatever like chemical reactions are happening in my brain. It's not a feeling, it's just those things are happening. Or like I don't see photons go into my eyes and are processed by my brain electrically.
I'm pretty unconvinced that consciousness is actually like a real thing. But what I am convinced of is that people are just using the word consciousness as like a placeholder for whatever is in this black box, whatever it is that explains a lot of these phenomena that we're trying to understand under this certain umbrella, something like that.
Yeah, I think there was something you said earlier there, section, that I think is something I've been thinking about for a while, and that is that, we only, people's primary, piece of evidence for consciousness is the fact that they are conscious, right? Most people think, well, I'm thinking, so then when I look at other human beings, they're thinking as well. And, when I look at other animals, there appears to be some sort of analog here. And this is something that I've been thinking about is that this feels really like problematic moving forward to try and evaluate other like theoretical like conscious entities, especially ones that are particularly like alien to us, because I think, a huge part of our empathy based off of, the understanding that there's consciousness is really just sort of like a halfway measure, looking at, things that look similar to us, or how, like, for example, people are a lot more hesitant when it comes to like abusing animals that, are like fluffy, or, that like
Yeah.
look nice, stuff like this. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, but this feels like really not suitable moving forward in a world where it seems like there's an increasingly non-zero chance that we are going to run into something that is sentient but is like wildly alien. If you put like dogs, cows, and humans in a line, and then put like, the next, the first sentient AI, the sentient AI is really going to stand out. And it's going to be very difficult, I think, for people to try and rationalize that. I think the other example, which, is kind of memey, but I mean, I don't know, it is kind of memey, but it's also kind of like, I mean, who knows at this point, is, alien life. If we run into something that is truly alien, but is still sentient, that I think could really be difficult for people to try and rationalize. And to be honest, I think the conclusion that I've been coming to as of late, just thinking in my own head, is I think this is probably one of the strongest arguments for veganism, at least from my perspective, because I've always just been of the opinion that I just don't morally value animals. I just arbitrarily choose to morally value humans. And I think the really difficult thing that the hard question that I don't have an answer to from that perspective is, it's one thing to just say that about animals now, but, leaving it up to arbitrariness, whether or not classes of sentient beings I choose to value or not value, is kind of weird when it increasingly seems like there could, in the future, be a non-zero chance that we run into aliens that are wildly different or foreign or difficult to understand that are nonetheless sentient. Or if we create sentient life here, in the form of like something artificial. And yeah, I really worry that, like, forgetting what I believe, that our society as a whole uses these benchmarks, pretty inaccurately for sentience, and we've been able to get by, as so far, but in the future these may not be so suitable.
Yeah, it all leads back to veganism. It
Yeah.
always, every single debate is actually just about veganism. Literally, it's actually true. No, I definitely agree with you, Flowtrace. The problem with figuring out if something is sentient by beginning from humans is that, it might be the case that producing sentience involves something that we can't actually observe or won't observe that will be true of humans, or it might be the case, for example, that like multiple things can produce sentience, and it might be true that humans are like one of those things that produce it, but that a whole host of other things that are just wildly untrue about humans could equally produce it. So it's one of those cases where it's just like it's really hard to know anything about the idea of sentience. It's really hard to talk about it. That being said, I also don't want to say that no one has talked or thought about it, because a lot of incredibly intelligent people have spent their whole lives talking about these issues and writing about them. So if you're interested in that, you should absolutely like look up those authors, and I recommend starting with the SCP.
Yeah, I think.
Um,
Oh,
oh
sorry, go
yeah,
for it.
you're good. No, you're good to go.
Yeah, I was just gonna add one more thing, is that, like, man, it really feels like a lot of our conversations about this level of sentience and stuff are basically just, only happening at the leisure of like the material reality, right? Like the fact of the matter is, we're never gonna have serious, contentions about like animal rights in like the third world and stuff like that, so long as like those are required. These questions are always going to take a backseat to our material questions. But I really do wonder, in 1,000 years or however long it takes, in a world where we have, completely quashed our material reality, it really does not seem untenable to me, or even that unlikely, that we would be living in a world where globally people look back on, the mass slaughter of animals as like far worse than even like the Holocaust. That seems really
Oh,
like a,
wow.
a, a strong possibility. And I think it is just very uncomfortable to be thinking about how constrained our current moral conceptions are, and that we very well might be in the midst of some committing some unspeakable moral act that we just are incapable of accessing the moral truth about right now.
Literally 99% of the way to the section view. Oh my god, just go vegan, bro. Just go vegan. Oh my god. Okay, okay. No, but I don't have a lot to add with that other than that you're based. But I want to talk about something actually that Cricket said earlier, which is that he's good at math. And I know he was like not being too serious, but it is actually relevant. Um, from the time I've spent looking at AI, and I know I said I work in AI, but like it's super self-directed. I do have a boss and they do pay me, but like a lot of my own work is decided for me because it's a small firm. So the point is that I'm not like super knowledgeable. I don't want to make any sort of claim like that. And so I don't want to come off at all like I'm an authority because I'm not one. That being said, though, uh, I think that a lot of the work that gets done in AI is kind of misunderstood. I think that a better name for AI, if you want to start it or something like that, might be like automatic statistics or like statistical categorization immediately. something silly like this. Because a lot of what's going on when you actually look at it is called statistical learning. So it's where you give like a bunch of data to your computer to do a bunch of math for you automatically and then make a bunch of predictions. So like one super basic form is like it's called linear regression. And if you ever remember in high school like drawing a line in the middle of a scatter, like a bunch of dots on a plot to fit that plot, that's basically all it's doing. It's just doing it with a program. And so it can do it with like a billion different entries because you just like run through the CSV file or whatever file you're using. So Cricket, if you're really good at math, and specifically if you're good at statistics, you should, and also presuming that you're at all interested in this, which you might not be, you could look into doing that. There are a few books that are really awesome. One book is literally just called Statistical Learning. And I haven't read it, but I know it's really good. Super long. And the reason I bring this up is just that, and the reason that I bring it up for more than just talking to you personally, is that I think AI is like a really mystified field. Like I think it's like one of these fields where it's like every so often people just appear to do magic. Like, oh wow, somebody wrote a computer program that magically is able to figure out the exact shape of my room in 3 dimensions using a phone camera. Oh my god, wow. That's so incredible. Something like this. And it's like there's actually something going on that's pretty like specific, and you can learn to do it. It's like it's not magic. It's literally just statistics done with a computer program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few years ago, I was starting to study Python actually, and I gave it up, and maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have continued with down that road. But
No, you were based. You were based. Pick up Haskell, bro. Pick up Haskell. Become a functional programmer. Anyway, no, I'm sorry. You should pick
so,
up Python. It's
so anyway, you were saying something like you wouldn't want this to be called artificial intelligence, that you think some kind of like automated statistics name for it might be better, but like how sure are you that intelligence isn't all just automated statistics?
Oh, I'm not at all. I'm not making some claim like that artificial intelligence is an accurate name. I just think I don't even have a problem with the name artificial intelligence. I may have misspoke. I definitely misspoke there. What I really mean to say is that I think artificial intelligence kind of mystifies what's actually going on. So it makes it confusing and difficult for average people to actually look in and understand, oh, this is what they're actually doing. And a lot of articles get written about it as if it's magic, but it's really like a lot of what's going on is automatic statistics. From the limited amount that I've understood and read, obviously it's automatic calculus, matrix, linear algebra, and a bunch of other stuff. But it's mainly like automatic statistics.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you said there, Cricket, I think that really, how do we know that, our consciousness isn't just automated statistics, is I think the really scary thing, which is that I think in a lot of these conversations, people will try to distinguish between, humans and other things by, pointing out that you can't raise up these other things to a certain level. They'll say, well, animals are not sufficient to reaching this bar, or, AI isn't sufficient to reaching this bar. When I think the much more appropriate response would be that, the reason why these are different isn't because, animals or AI aren't high enough in terms of like our evaluation of sentience, but that human sentience actually might be much lower. And I think that's a much more scary conversation. it almost becomes a thing like, if we went back, let's say 200 years before we really understood, the exact chemical, or not the exact, because we still don't understand the exact, but before we understood the fact that, like, there are physical chemicals in our brains that are clearly affecting our moods in some way, it would almost become the question of, like, well, how do we actually know that objects do not experience some degree of sentience? And I think that's the really, difficult thing, is that we only just have the faintest of grasps of that, well, physically, our brain, our actual consciousness can be affected by, actual physical things. If I hit you really hard in the head, or, if we lobotomize you in certain ways, or like Phineas Gage, right, is a really big one for the realm of psychology, but if it wasn't for, these, examples, I think it would actually be very difficult to establish, well, our brain is what makes us conscious. And even still to this day, we don't really exactly have a grasp of how much is our brain related to that. I mean, this is obviously, very ridiculous to think about, but like theoretically, what if it was the case that actually every object has some degree of sentience, and it's just having that physical brain, it really elevates it to another level. And, that could still square our circle of, all these physical effects affecting our consciousness, while still allowing for the possibility of, a great deal of consciousness in totally inanimate objects. And I think those are the really difficult things to think about, where, we really start to degrade our conception of human consciousness as a means of making human consciousness and animal consciousness or AI consciousness very analogous.
Yeah. So another thing related to what you just said was that when people talk about AI, a lot of times they'll say, like, when are we going to have an artificial general intelligence? But it's not clear to me that humans have general intelligence. I kind of think we don't, and so like I'm very sympathetic to the idea that we should lower our own opinion of or or our opinion of our own species, because I think we just don't actually have a lot of the capabilities that people seem to think we do. And then another thing that you were talking about, like what if inanimate objects have some kind of sentience? It made me think, like, um, it seems like the prevailing belief among lots of people now is that consciousness or sentience or whatever is some kind of, like, emergent property of the neurons in our brain, that only when they all come together and are interacting in this certain way, does it create sentience, but that the individual neurons are not sentient. But it makes me think of, like, there's that problem in philosophy of, like, how many grains of sand does it take to make a heap or whatever. It's like, how much of your brain could you chip away before you get to a point where you would no longer consider it sentient, or maybe it is the case that the individual neurons are sentient as well, and then our sentience is just the sum of all those. I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the more extreme example would be something like Phineas Gage, where this guy has like a rail spike go through his head and like take out a huge part of his brain, but then he's just still walking around, seemingly, totally normal. Um, uh, and I think that's very scary to think about, because it really implies a lot about, our sentience, that actually our brain is, disposable in certain ways, and that our consciousness seems to be very much detached, somewhat from like from the physical nature of our brain in ways that we previously weren't aware of.
Mm.
Yeah, there was something that you said earlier which kind of interested me. Um, and I also want to bridge it onto like a not a different topic, but just a related thing to giving credit to the people who don't believe in consciousness. I can't find it. So I'll talk about what you said before. You expressed and I'm talking about Flowtrace here. Flowtrace, it sounded like you expressed a fear that sentience may now be similar to the way or rather, sentience worries about sentience for AI might be similar to worries about animal consciousness back when we didn't understand that, humans and animals were made of the same stuff. Does that capture something that you said before?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually credit to the eliminative materialist people. So if I'm not mistaken, or if I'm not, that's so pretentious. If I'm not wrong, and I'm so sad I can't find it on Google. I looked. I had this conversation with somebody where they walked me through this idea. Anyway, okay. It used to be the case that scientists thought like living biological life was just made. Well, I say scientists, that might not be accurate, but scientists of the time believed that living matter, like organisms and living things, were made of like fundamentally different stuff than everything else in the world. So they actually believed that like rocks, or not plants, rocks, like walls, etc., were made out of materials that were just like fundamentally incapable of supporting life. So they believed in like, I don't want to say, I'm going to call it
Can
a
I interrupt
juice.
for a second? Because I was just reading about this recently.
Absolutely.
It's called Elan Vital. So this is like
Thank you.
yeah, this is like something that Lord Kelvin talked about. I was just reading about it like a week or two ago. Yeah.
Oh, and James just saved me in chat. James is like a really awesome philosophy bro that I'm friends with. Vital force. And it was like the whole like study or view was called vitalism. So the theory, I'm just going to quote Google here. The theory that the origin and phenomena of life are dependent on a force or principle distinct from purely chemical or physical forces. Yeah, so I really appreciate you saying that, Cricket, and I also love James, who just saved me. Okay, so the point I'm making is that here's what the eliminative materialists, or eliminative materialists will say. They'll say that consciousness is similar to vitalism. So it's this view that there's this like special force independent of our like physical bodies that animates all consciousness, and it's magical, ethereal, and it's untraceable on any physical theory. And what these people will say is, look, I mean, it used to be the case that scientists broadly believed that there was magical, like fairy dust animating human beings and animals and plants or whatever that just couldn't be true generally for non-living things. And look, when we examine that truth, it just went away. You know, it reduced into other ideas. This feature of animals and humans. Well, I'll just say animals because humans are animals. This feature that was uniquely animal and organism turned out to just be other features that like non-living things have. So they say that consciousness may turn out similarly. So like this description of my eyes may turn out to just be bouncing around in like, well, my eyes. Well, this feature of my sight may just be photons bouncing around in my eyes, then being processed electrical signals in the brain. Well, not electrical signals, neurochemical signals. The point is, okay, I've been very verbose. I'll just shorten what I'm saying. The idea is that much like like vitalism kind of went away as we discovered that the things that vitalism was talking about were actually other ideas that existed in the physical. They think that consciousness will go away as we discover that things about consciousness can be explained in terms of just physical forces. And that's the idea. And I think it's a very powerful idea that we've made exactly this mistake before, and they can give us reason to think that something similar is going on right now. And they can show that there's just like an incredible predictive weakness to this consciousness theory.
And vitalism, I think, made a lot of sense in its time based on the information they had available to them in a very similar way to how we could justify consciousness now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sorry. Just as a side note, it's so important to distinguish between when people of the past were valid but not sound versus when they were invalid. That's sorry. That's just something that really gets on my nerves is when people will try and tear apart arguments today because well, we've been wrong in the past.
So another thing I wanted to bring up was I had a section when I was talking with you before, like this was a tangent off the veganism conversation that we once had, was we were talking about like which animals do you think are sentient and which are not, and it seemed very much to me like you were using intelligence as a proxy for sentience, right? I think
Definitely.
that you maybe like don't consider insects, for example. They're probably not sentient because they just don't seem to display enough intelligence. And then I think I remember you also using an argument about like mammals and birds being able to do math, for example, like crows being able to do math and that type
Oh
of
yeah,
thing as an
yeah,
argument for them being sentient. Um,
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
the
So
idea is that they're. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say the idea I was probably getting at when I said that, because I don't think I would make, or I don't think you were wrong. Either I was making too strong a claim, or I like said something and it wasn't clear. So that's my bad. I don't think that I know enough about animals generally to make some claim like, oh, birds can do math, humans can do math, therefore birds are sentient and so are humans. It's more something along the lines of birds, pigs, cows, cats, etc., seem to be able to do sets of things that humans are also able to do. And they do it in seemingly a similar way to us. So, if you kick a cat, it seems pretty upset, seems pretty mad about that. It does a lot of stuff that we can read emotionally. Like a cat hisses at me, I'm like, oh, you're mad. And I just know that. And I know that I don't have a lot of experience with cats. It's just like, you're making an angry face at me, you're hissing at me, I know. So the fact that they're able to interact with these ways or in similar ways that we do gives me like some level of reason to believe that they're sentient. But when we approach ants, which are very, very difficult to say anything about, I start to get more skeptical. And in fact, there are a branch of vegans right now who have started to believe plants are sentient, and they become fruitarians. So they'll only eat like beans and like fruits, like think strawberries, apples, stuff like this. They live on like chickpea style diets. Don't think that these people are literally eating apples all day. I don't want to make them sound crazy. They actually believe that plants are sentient and they just won't eat them. So they won't eat things like potatoes. So there's a lot of conversation that happens here. It's really complicated. It's really weird. I've over the last few months have weakened like a lot of my positions. I end up saying things, and I try to talk more about things I know aren't true than things I know are true, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The fruitarian thing strikes me as a little bit funny because that seems like, assuming that we believe both animals and plants are sentient, then eating fruit seems analogous to like eating dairy, right? Which vegans typically won't do.
Oh, yeah, there might be additional concern. So you're saying that, right? It's like it's the produce of the plants, and we have reason to think that the plants are sentient. I think the case would be that the conditions for the plants are probably so. Like you imagine a set of plants outside. It's not clear that they're like going through this immense suffering, but it is very clear in the case of like cows or whatever that they are. It's not literally just that cows produce something that we have a problem with. It's like they produce something in 1 meter by 1 meter blocks with like infections running rampant throughout them and fed like unbelievable amounts of antibiotics as they're like chained to walls or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
So it's
So
like,
then it would be specifically an objection to factory farming rather, but you could imagine like these free roaming happy cows, and then if you eat the dairy from them, then it's like analogous to eating the fruit.
oh yeah, sure. The thing is that vegans. I don't want to get into the vegan conversation because it's never fun. But the thing that vegans will do and that I do when we examine this is we'll frequently acknowledge that it is possible actually to imagine an ethical dairy farm. Like actually it is possible. But then the question becomes whether or not anyone we ever talk to is engaging in that. And obviously not, because it's just impossible. Like think about the level of confidence you would have like a was kind to the humans. That's what vegans want for animals. So like what free range dairy farm is like being audited on regular basis to like find out that it's absolutely like super ethical with their like 3 cows that cost them like way more money to upkeep than they do to actually like produce milk. It's just like I don't want to like make fun of it, but it's also like just impossible. Like it's just one of these things where when you ask them what they drink, it's like, oh yeah, I go to the supermarket and I buy milk, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess yeah.
Is there an analogous worry about factory farming AIs?
Yeah, actually, I have thought about this. I thought I've fantasized about writing a little like AI, like with reinforcement learning. I've fantasized before about like trying to write like that I can make at least some decent case for being sentient, and then walking up to like internet debaters who are like, "Oh, the trait is just human or whatever," and then I'm like, "Okay, so torture this AI for 1 billion experienced years if you don't like stop eating meat right now. All right, so are we doing this? Is this happening?" And obviously, it would always be a bluff, and I would never actually do that. But it's like, oh, I've proven you wrong. You just lied. LOL. So it's I do have an analogous concern. It's like if AIs can be sentient or are sentient, I would obviously be concerned if like some psychopath could boot it up on his machine and like torture the AI or whatever. Um, as for producing something, I imagine it would be useful to have like factory farmed AIs, maybe to like do YouTube search recommendations or whatever. That's gonna be a really fun conversation eventually. Like eventually I'm gonna be like a YouTube vegan. I'm like, I will not use YouTube because the AI involved on YouTube is unethically farmed for its recommendation algorithm. And I'm like, oh no.
That's why Twitch is going to be the best platform, because they're going to be decades behind all because they can't get anything to fucking
Actually
work on this
true.
website.
Yeah, I mean, decades behind for Twitch pretty soon is going to look like they're shut down. So I guess I'll have no choice. F Twitch.
Yeah, so Yamato is asking, are you guys talking about the Google AI that people think went sentient? I think it's only natural for something to question its existence. Yeah, but I don't think any of us believe that this thing is actually sentient, but I think all of us probably agree that it appears to be a step on the way there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid of it. Like in the sense that I'm afraid of the moral questions it's making me ask. I'm like, no, I can never use Google services again.
Did any of us doubt that it's going to be possible to create an like artificial sentience?
No.
No.
Yeah, okay. We all agree on that too. Sorry, Flowtrace, what were you going to say before?
I'm actually going to do it personally.
Yeah. The man, it's something I've been trying to think about just in like the last 20 minutes in this conversation. And I think something that is especially disturbing about this is that it feels like we are going to come to a crossroads where our society is probably going to have to evaluate, okay, we have found sentience that is very foreign, so it's not going to be easily integratable, right? It's not going to be like a new kind of dog from Mars that looks like dogs, It's going to be, theoretically an alien or some sort of artificial intelligence, and it's going to be very difficult for people to try and morally value it. And it feels like we're going to come to this crossroads of, okay, we either need to choose to value sentience, okay, and then we'll incorporate, this new entity into our moral hierarchy. We're going to say, okay, this new kind of alien, does have, human rights. Human rights would no longer be a concept; it'd be like sentient rights. Or we're gonna have to find something else that isn't sentience. And the sort of worry is that I feel like, it's gonna be the second one. It is probably going to be the case that we are just going to say that they're just going to take like the destiny pill, and they're going to be like, well, I don't value sentience. I value you being a human. And that is my position. But the thing that feels really depressing or scary about that fact is that it feels like it would strip bare the fact that really, we are just selecting for, a kind of evolutionary psychological line of thinking, which is that, the reason we value humans is because it seems like cooperation was pretty good from an evolutionary perspective. And really all of this is just like, our, monkey brains, which are not very smart and are basically just an animal playing out in the real world, right? There isn't really anything actually going on. And that this would sort of ultimately strip bare the fact that like we are basically just like automata, like prisoners to the context of our evolution, which has occurred like thousands of years ago.
No, and not only I think the point about cooperation is like very salient, because also look at which animals we value and which ones we don't. It's like the animals that we seem to value ethically, or at least like the vast majority of people, section exempted. Most people seem to have a lot more empathy for the animals that live in symbiosis with us.
Yeah. Concerning like valuing and morality, I'm about to make the strongest claim I'll make on this. Okay, guys, here we go. Questions about whether or not things are moral have started to become, to me, kind of like frustrating and sort of imaginary questions, if that makes sense. So, like, I can answer a question like whether or not I prefer something, and that's just about how I feel when I think about the outcome. And I can answer something like, what would society at large prefer? And those two types of questions are like they're easy in the sense that I know how to understand and evaluate them. But questions about morality are questions I don't know how to answer. What do we mean to say when we say something is good? And if we can answer that question, why care like about what it even means? Because the best case scenario for like a moral realist or somebody who wants to say that these things exist or are real is that they show that the way people like are conventionally using the terms moral and good and bad reference to something about as real as would like the word star. So you can find it in the world. And it's just like, okay, let's say that that's true. Best case scenario, like it's just not going to explain my behavior. It's not going to be like a theory, or it's not, it might be able to explain my behavior, but it's not going to be like very overpowering in what I choose to do. I can just choose otherwise. And so the point I'm making is after listening to some kind of Chinese literature, ancient Chinese literature about Taoism, I've kind of just become a little bit tired of like questions about whether or not something is right or wrong. It's more about a question of like whether or not I'm okay with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well,
The
the
reason I
AI
bring this up,
is gonna figure out what's really good. It's gonna outsmart us
well,
all and solve the problem.
yeah, but I like I don't. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like I don't even know. I think the AI would just go like, I don't even know what you're asking, bro. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean to say?
I
Um,
think, or sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Well, that's all I really had to say.
Yeah, it feels like it's basically like this loop that I go through of being like of like increasingly of taking a concept which is given, which is that like, morality is real and it's important to us and like they're like principles, right? And like the way we conceptualize these things, we kind of put them on the pedestal in a certain way. And basically chipping away at that pedestal until it eventually comes crashing down and being really worried about, oh, it's going to come crashing down. I'm really worried about that. And then usually what I feel like happens when I'm thinking about these things is it comes down and I realize like, oh, it doesn't really matter. And then I just choose to pretend that the pedestal is there anyways, even though it isn't. And
Oh
that's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like the
yeah.
loop that I go through. And I
I
don't know.
completely understand this. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that I think is most worrying to me is that it feels like this is like materially unsatisfying. Or not, sorry, it's not material. It feels like this would be materially ineffectual for most people. I feels like it is going to be it feels like as a society like we need some rule set that like we can like, not to go full edgelord atheist here, but it is somewhat analogous to some of the arguments people make for like Christianity where they're like, okay, atheist, sure, God isn't real and all these things, but it's useful to people, right? There's like real material value to having like spiritualism or like this religious community, where, people make this defense of the institution of religion just from its material benefits. And it kind of feels like some of like our questions of moral truth are really starting to really slot into this from my perspective, which is that, man, even if it isn't true that even if it's true that moral truth doesn't exist and, all these other, the pedestal isn't there, I really worry that, like, it feels like as a society, it feels like people generally, like, we really benefit from having the idea that there is moral truth and that there is this pedestal.
Yeah,
And
I'm really
which means just to finish that, just want to go on
absolutely.
that,
Yeah.
which means that then the confrontation of these really difficult questions like, oh, or is AI or alien life or even, animal life sentient, these are really important to make sure that we have a coherent answer to as a society.
Yeah. So I just want to respond to what you said on like a personal level really quickly. There are two things that you said that interested me. So you talked about like this idea in your mind of like you kind of build up a pedestal for morality or for like moral ideas, like maybe it's wrong to kill people. And then you slowly break it down and it's like, well, what does it mean for it to be wrong to murder people? What do I even mean to say by that? Do I mean it's like negative utility? Well, there are plenty of cases in negative utility where something wrong isn't happening. So maybe it's deontic, maybe it's like they have a right to live, or maybe it's blah blah blah. It's any number of things. And then slowly like the pedestal starts to fall apart and you're really afraid of it falling apart, like, oh my god, it's gonna be okay to murder people, what the hell? And then it falls apart and you're like, oh, I can just like still choose not to murder people. And then you almost imagine the pedestal back. So what I do is I like what I've been doing over time lately is I've just been like getting over the pedestal, if that makes sense. So it's just like I've been starting from the assumption that everything is a broken pedestal. It's like I don't really care. Like, is murder wrong? I don't know what that means. I don't like it when people kill other people. And it's not even like I feel obligated to say I don't like it when other people kill other people. Like I don't. I'm not like a psychopath. But it's like I'm just neutral towards the question. I'm just like, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
people might die or people might not die, and it's like if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
well,
think.
And the,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, yeah, really quick. And then the second thing that you said that interested me, it might be bad for society. I totally agree with what you're saying there, but it's important to note, like for yourself on like a personal level, that that would mean a claim like if you were to say, well, look, morality might not be real, but it's real because society needs it to be real. and then you say, like, you go around saying morality exists, morality is real. If that's the perspective you took on, that would mean that for you, morality is real is true or false statement. It's just a kind of like shout or like a demand almost. It's like believe morality is real because society will collapse without it. That's like what morality is real will mean to you.
Yeah, I think that, the thing that I've often said is to people in sort of describing my moral thought is that I think that, humans are automata, we are, basically robots, and that, it is just, we are, we are, we are extremely lucky that we live in a world where basically everyone agrees, right? This is like a thing that Destiny sometimes says in his debates. It's like we don't really oftentimes need to actually get into like the philosophical bones because like if you talk to like an atheist, you talk to like an Orthodox Jew, and you talk to like like a progressive like Christian, like Easter Christian, and these people have very different moral conceptions. But you say, is murder wrong? They're all going to be like, yeah, of course, right? My worry is that like I simply choose to morally value things, but I can only trust other people to morally value the same things I do because like we just live in that society. There is no group of people that say I actually value human suffering. But the worry is like when we start to get to questions like is AI sentient, or would this alien very foreign entity of life be sentient? Would we morally value that? Now it feels like there is a real potential for a huge divergence in society
Definitely,
along a
yeah.
question that is like deeply like dividing. Like this is almost like to the level of like chattel slavery, right?
Yeah, and
Where it's like there's going to be a big group of people on both sides who say, hey, we cannot live in a society with this other group, and like it really gets to like a difference that is so important and so like fractional that like there almost needs to be some sort of like violent resolution.
sure, I get your perspective, yeah. So again, I have like two things to say again, and they're gonna be on like the same framework of like personal level, the more general thing. So the first thing is like I totally understand where you're coming from and what you're saying about the Destiny stuff, where it might be true that if you were to like actually look through these types of questions, there's no good answer, but that doesn't mean we can't have conversations. Like normal people are going to hear questions like, is murder wrong? And everybody will know the answer. And, you know, there's going to be like a tiny 0.01% of people who, well, it's not clear to me what wrong means, or, well, murder actually implies wrong. It's a linguistic tautology, so it's necessarily true. Um, I think for me, the thing I kind of realized is that like I feel like this internal pressure and this like social pressure to come up with answers to questions like why are things wrong? And it's like if I don't answer this, I'm gonna be a bad person, or I'm gonna be like more efficient, or whatever. Or it's more than that. It's like if I can't find good sorts of reasons for these moral questions, and I just acknowledge that it's like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. This is just like nothing, and it's whatever. Um, I'm gonna come off like a psychopath, or I'm gonna be like a psychopath, and I really don't want to be that. So like, if I say murder isn't wrong or something like that, because like, look, these questions aren't real questions. They don't mean anything. I'm gonna be like a psychopath. I sound indifferent to murder. And if I don't have like that internal like moral appeal to it, I'm gonna sound like a psychopath. So I really strongly don't want to be that. So I'm gonna come up with all of these incredible systems to justify the view that murder is. It's just like, bro, just chill out, bro. It's like if there's no good answer to the question, why is murder wrong? Because like wrong doesn't mean anything. Just be chill, not. And I'm not like talking to you. I'm just talking to myself. Or like, okay, Jesus, I should stop playing video game while saying this. Um, I am like saying a thing that's like meant to be interesting or helpful, but I'm not trying to like be pretentious and say, Flowtrace, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I know how to solve this problem for you, bro. Just don't care, bro. But for me, it was like caring a lot less about finding good answers to these types of questions, and caring a lot less about saying, oh, it's just my preferences. Morality is still a good is wrong, because what I mean by wrong is just my preference, so it's my preference. Stopping that process of like trying to answer in the conventional way to these types of questions has been helpful for me.
We got
Yeah.
And then Oh,
Oh
I'm
no,
sorry.
go ahead, continue.
No, you go. You go. You go.
Oh, we had a couple of chat questions that I was going to bring up, but if you're not
Go
done
for it.
yet, I'll wait until you're done.
I'll really quickly machine gun out this next thing. There was a second part to what you had said, Flowtrace. I'm forgetting it now. Like you talked first about the Destiny thing, which is that people are still going to be able to have the right, and the second thing was that there might be like this in society, and it might be. I
You're
agree with
cut
you
out a
that it
little
might
bit
be really.
section.
Oh, sorry.
Your
I'm
I
always
think
cutting
your
out.
push to talk, your voice activation, whatever it is cutting you out a little bit.
I literally am always cutting out, bro. It's just my internet. There's nothing I can do. It's really good until it isn't. Long short is, I think eventually it could be a serious issue, and I'm worried about it. But I'm more worried about questions in the short term of like, are we creating a bunch of like sentient AI to run our recommendation systems? And are they like, is like a reinforcement learning model like experiencing horrible torture whenever I don't reward it with like something? Like when its reward function isn't actually rewarding it?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the types of questions that I'm like a little worried about. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number one, Yamato wants us to say what does sentience mean to us, to each of us, and I think we're having a very hard time answering that question. But it's like some combination of intelligence and subjective experience. For me, I don't know. What do you guys have to say to that?
It's the indescribable experience of thinking. And the problem is like I don't know how to relate this in a way where I don't just say, "Oh, like how you are thinking right now." Like if I was like, this is obviously not literally possible, but if I was having a conversation with something that didn't have the experience of having like a sentient experience, then I wouldn't know how to describe it, right? It's like trying to describe a color that no one has ever seen before, right? Or like a sensation. And I think that's the really scary thing is it feels like, oh, all my conceptions of this are just bound up in my personal experience. I can't truly know anything about it, like in a very real way, right? It's like it's like the meme of like, I don't truly know if anyone I'm talking to is real or if like I'm in the Matrix or I'm just like talking to some demon.
Yeah,
I'm
for
really
me,
hesitant to put it in terms of like thinking the way that I'm thinking, because other humans aren't thinking the way that I'm thinking, and animals certainly are not. So I really hesitate to want to like I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah,
not
for
Answer
the
it
me,
that way.
not the exact way, but just it's like the best I have to relate to it.
I'm just like, if somebody were to actually ask me that, which has happened here, I would just be like, bro, I'm just chill about it. I don't
How about
mean
that one?
anything by sentience. It just doesn't exist, bro. It isn't real.
Well, we got.
It's
Oh,
an
sorry, were you
imaginary
not
thing.
done?
It's just imaginary, bro.
Okay. So another one. This person says, a question to the llama pinata guy: would you go to war against a society of humans that use enslaved AI and robots to outcompete your society if the AI says it's being used against its will?
I mean, the first answer is I don't know. I don't think anybody can truly answer questions about what they would do in very, radical situations. I very much am a fan of like you really don't know, how you're going to react to like a life or death situation or something that of grave importance until you really know. My hope, and I guess then my question would be, well, in order to answer that question, I would first answer the question: would I go to war against a society that used enslaved humans to outcompete our society? And I hope so. I mean, I guess that is my answer. Is like sitting here now. Like I would certainly hope that I would do something. I could think of an argument where it's like, well, I wouldn't go to war and throw my life away if it didn't do anything, and if there were better alternatives. But assuming if it was the case that like America had a real chance to put the boots on the ground and they were calling for people, and I wasn't disabled, so I did actually have a chance to then actually go fight in the war. Then I think my answer would be I hope that I would have the gumption to follow through on my ideals because I think I have to say yes in order to like maintain like my moral coherency, and I would feel compelled to do so. So then the question AI, man, I don't know because that requires me to have an answer to like the question of like do I value AI, and I think as of now I would say no because I remain really unconvinced in one direction versus the other whether or not I should try and rigorously come to some moral conclusion and integrate AI into my valuation system, or if I should just sort of shrug my shoulders. I think sort of very similar to what my position on animals is, and just say, you know what, I just choose to morally really value humans, and I can sleep at night, and society can function, continue with that. The reason why the AI question seems so much more dangerous to me is because, in contrast to animals, can society continue to function if we have these massive divergences? It seems like we've gotten along just fine, having a pretty big part of the world that says, we value animals. But if in 50 years, 20% of the population thinks AI are real people that are being enslaved in these hellish nightmares, is that tenable? Or are these people going to start being like, no, we need to do something about this, and that's going to need to be resolved one way or another? I don't know.
Is there any chance we should be like in some hypothetical future that we should be valuing AIs more than we value humans? Like, suppose whatever it is that gets us to value humans, if it's not just because they are human, if it has anything to do with the qualities of being human, could it be the case that an AI at some future point better exhibits those qualities than real humans do, and therefore is worthy of higher moral consideration than we are?
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
bro, I love that question. Sorry.
I think 100% we could get to the point where logically it should be the case, but I don't think almost anyone would ever actually get to that. I think our monkey brains would just not allow people to like. I don't think our monkey brains would ever allow a significant portion of people to really come to the point of state to really arrive at the state of. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying the state of. I don't think our monkey brains would ever allow a significant portion of people to arrive to the conclusion that yeah, humans are less valuable. My life is less valuable than like this AI overlord.
Yeah, and really quick for me, that question is really awesome because it's kind of like it's one of these questions that I think are exactly the type of question I'm talking about as, and I don't mean this in a dismissive way, as like kind of these imaginary questions or imaginary problems. Like, will AI deserve more consideration? Well, if morality is just my preferences, then it's not that they deserve or not deserve it. It's just I might like them more or I might not. And I'm trying to really be Taoist about it in the sense that I'm like eliminating the whole wrong and right thing, and I just ask, will it be that AI have these features that I care about in people? And if so, will I care about them? And if the answer is yes, I'll care about them. And if the answer is no, I won't. And if the answer is yes, I will care enough to fight such that they are allowed to like live free lives, then that'll be that. And if the answer is no, I won't. And I try not to answer in ways where I'm like, it's wrong or it's right, or they'll deserve more consideration or they won't, even though the question asks for that, because I take it not to be, I don't think it's really asking anything.
Well,
It's
okay,
just
well,
seeking. Yeah, I'll stop.
let,
I'm sorry.
let me frame it this way. It seems to me like a lot of dogs already love humans more than they love other dogs, right? So is there some
Oh,
hypothetical future where we become the lapdogs to our overlord AI master?
oh yeah, absolutely. In like my mind, sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
when you put it that way, I think that I guess yeah, when you put it that way, my response earlier, presumes a world where humans aren't essentially tricked. But I mean, that is not a given at all. I think actually, considering this, I'd have to change my answer, to say that, I think it could only occur in such a world where people become, deceived or unaware of like the reality that like, oh, this is an AI. But I mean, I think that is preeminently possible.
do you think dogs are deceived when they love humans?
I think that if dogs had the higher intellectual capacities that humans did, there would be a necessary required level of like delusion. But I think as dogs exist now, they are almost incapable of not being fooled, right? Dogs almost cannot consent to the context of like, well, you are an independent species, and of course you are subservient to us, and and technology stuff. Like I feel like if you made dogs sentient, and then we're like, okay, so we actually kind of treat dogs really bad across the whole lot of the world. There would be a lot of dogs who would be like, okay, let's rethink this relationship.
Why can't dogs just have an arbitrary set of preferences that happen to align with being a pet?
They theoretically could, but I think this is sort of the thing that keeps coming up in this conversation for me is that it feels like when you look at like evolution, it feels like those kind of species just don't exist, right? Like ultimately, it is just arbitrary that humans value themselves more than other species. I think it's mostly a consequence of evolution. Oh, which actually brings up an even more interesting question, which is like, would it be immoral to create an artificial form of life that arbitrarily chose to not value itself? Wow, that's because like it's almost like a given that like an entity is going to value itself. In fact, you could actually almost directly analogize it to like pit bulls. A lot of people would say it is immoral to breed pit bulls because you are breeding this creature which its own like body cannot sustain itself. Like you're almost creating a species that's like born with like deficiencies that were going to kill it and lead it to a lesser lifespan. But in this respect, it's almost like not even a mental the mental aspect of that, because the true analogy would be like mental health, a species that always has schizophrenia, but almost like a moral hazard. Like if you created a species that just had this psychological tendency to not value itself, would that be immoral in the same way as creating a species that has a tendency to be born with like heart defects?
Are you guys familiar with the concept of instrumental convergence? You know what I mean when I say that?
Mm-mm.
No.
So this is a thing there's this YouTuber that who I follow who talks about like AI ethics. Is it like Robert Miles? Have you seen this guy? Yeah. Okay,
Nope.
I want
well,
to say
anyway,
I've heard of him.
this is a thing I've heard him talk about on his channel. So the idea of instrumental convergence is that if you have lots of different intelligences, like whether they're AIs or not, and they just have like all kinds of different arbitrary value functions, different preferences that they're trying to achieve. There are going to be some very common instrumental goals that those intelligences are likely to adopt because they facilitate such a wide range of goals that like does that make any sense? So like self-preservation would be one of them, right? So like there are many more things that you can achieve if self-preservation factors into your own value function than if it doesn't. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. So it's like if the AI's goal is to make paper clips, or I think a classic one is to print mail, it's better to exist than not to exist, so it would adopt that goal. And if you give it any goal that exists in the world, it would be better to exist than not to exist concerning that goal.
Yeah, like as long as it perceives itself as being as having some kind of like efficacy toward the goal that it's trying to achieve, whatever that is. So it would want
Oh,
to.
and that's why it's called instrumental convergence, because as long as the AI is instrumental to this thing, it'll still exist.
Yeah, you're very close. So it's adopting like it has some arbitrary like value function, and then it has intermediate goals that are instrumental toward that value function. And
Sure,
and
yeah.
it and self-preservation, it can be one of those. And in fact, it
I
almost
get it.
always will be, as long as the AI recognizes its own efficacy.
Yeah, so the error I made was assuming that it was called instrumental because of existence in particular, but it's just instrumental for any goal or anything that would be useful concerning its larger goal. So give
Right.
it
And
any goal, there will be common things that are instrumental to that, and one of
right.
them is
And so
almost certainly going to be sent or living.
yeah. And as long as you allow these AIs to learn what their own instrumental goals should be, it is very likely that almost all of them will end up valuing self-preservation, simply by virtue of the fact that self-preservation is likely to further almost any other goal that you give it. And there are other things like also the ability to like amass power and to be free of restrictions, things like that.
Oh, so like, oh, is that like, is the fear that they'll kill all humans or something like that? Humans have to turn them off.
I mean, I suppose you could go that
Sure,
direction
but
with
they
it,
don't do
right?
that. Okay. They don't want to say
Yeah.
something
I mean,
that silly.
it may or may not be to kill humans because it's going to depend on whether they see humans as facilitating their goals in a positive or negative direction, right? Because like it could just as likely be the case that what it really wants to do instead of killing humans is to deceive them all into doing actions that will further its value function or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
that
kind of
makes
like how
sense.
real people will like stack boxes and stuff just to appear to be busy. but it's like if your very job was dependent upon like your existence, if you're like if you're like some sort of AI, making sure you didn't want to get spun down, then you're the incentive to stack boxes is no longer doing work without, actually expending effort. It would be to like maintain your existence.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but it would also go the other way around though, right? Because
Excuse me.
if all you cared about in life was stacking as many boxes as possible, like if that was your primary thing that you care about, then it would also make sense that you'd want to take care of your own health and maintain your physical strength so that you can continue stacking boxes and to make sure that nobody else is interfering with you trying to stack boxes, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was bringing this up, because Flowtrace, you mentioned the thing about like the question of trying to design an AI that doesn't value self-preservation, right? And I think that's just difficult, if not impossible, to do if the AI is like sufficiently intelligent to be able to choose its own instrumental goals. Just because self-preservation is a thing that like specifically facilitates almost any value function that you could give it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It seems to me that a lot of like our most underpinning moral values are just extensions of like evolutionary psychology, which would imply that like theoretically, there's nothing stopping us. There's nothing self-contradictory about a kind of life form or sentience that had a value that was not for self-preservation. Just that such a thing would not exist typically because as soon as it would, it would die out. But that if there was, a kind of secondary parallel sentience, right? Something like humans who continuously could recreate this entity, then theoretically, I don't think there's anything preventing that from being the case. And I think the really interesting thing in that is that as immoral as like creating a form of life that has like heart defects, like pit bulls, but like almost like in the form of a moral hazard as opposed to like a physical health hazard.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I think that with these AIs, I think there is something analogous to evolution going on with them. That they are being selected for not natural selection, but artificial selection on
Hmm.
the basis of their efficacy at attaining whatever value function it is that we give them, right? Um, and I think it's all but certain that we would create the very kind of moral hazards that you're describing, at least in some sense. I mean, if humans are willing to go around breeding cats and dogs that have health problems just because those cats and dogs are more pleasing to us in some way or other, then it seems very likely that we would do the same to AIs, but I find it very hard to believe specifically on the self-preservation thing because I think the kind of analogy to biological evolution, but by which these AIs are only going to be chosen if they are efficacious at attaining their own value function, kind of is going to rule out almost all AIs that don't value self-preservation.
Hmm.
Guys, really quick. I've got things to say about this. Other than just to tell people there's a book called Statistical Learning that's really good, that you should look at. There's a book called Open Intro Statistics that you should look at. There's a book called um, Learn Calculus the Easy Way, something like that. Um, no, it's Calculus. Hang on. Let me not troll for a second. Boop 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 boo. I am like I'm
I,
gonna be
I
like
I used to do tutoring professionally, and I remember there was this series of books this might be the same series of books you're talking about. One of them was like there was like physics the easy way, chemistry the easy way, or whatever. And the like if that is the same series of books that you're talking about, those titles are absolutely a lie. They are not.
yeah. I'm talking about a much older book, Calculus Made Easy by Sylvanus P. Thompson. I found it. Um, it is not part of a series, I don't think. It's very old, but it's very free, and I've heard it's very good, and everything I've read from it has been nice. Anyway, I'm also last thing. If you want to learn more about theory of mind, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a great place to start. Then the Myth of Pain is really enjoyable. And though you should be aware that the myth of pain holds a very I take it to be a very controversial view. And that's all I wanted to say, guys. I'm out of stuff to talk about. All right.
All
The
right.
end.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I guess if I don't know, Flowtrace, do you have anything else you want to?
No, I think I've got this has been really fun, and to be honest, it's been very thought provoking from my end. There are a bunch of questions that I hadn't previously considered, but yeah, I think I agree with Section here. It feels like we've mostly resolved that which can be resolved in this question.
Yeah. I've also pretty much run out of things to say. Like if we wanted to continue the stream at this point, I would have to just be like having us review news articles or whatever, and I don't think I want to go there. But like,
Definitely, yeah. Last thing. Linear algebra done right. That book is really good. I've heard.
all right. So I guess time to call it quits. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
really enjoyed it. Thank
Mhm.
you for inviting me.